Welcome back to what is in fact the first of two conversations that we're going to be having as part of this Designing the Future of Kids TV. The first half is going to be a conversation with Michael from Mattel, who I'll introduce properly in a minute. And then the second half is going to be a conversation with Daniel from Maker and Nick from Hopster. And then after the break, we're going to be talking to some people working in the YouTube digital channel space and the evolving space that is coming, seems to be evolving from what were the MCNs. So without further ado, Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Michael, who's the VP and Head of Global Consumer Insights and Core Brand Leadership at Mattel, I think is correct, right? Good. So first of all, obviously, what we're here to talk about with Michael is really the way that play, children's attitudes and relationship with play are changing, what the evolving role, therefore, of a big toy company like Mattel is, and obviously for a lot of the people in the room here, what that means for the future partnership between TV producers, content producers, and toy companies. As we all know, the toy deal has become a very, very important plank in people's often pre-financing. But obviously, as the rise of the VOD players and the way kids consume content is changing, that will also change. So I know that many people in the audience will be interested in that. But I think, first of all, Michael, what would be great would be to hear from you. This is called a fireside chat. We only lack the fire, but we just have to imagine a blazing log fire and maybe a whiskey. But first of all, Michael, maybe you could just explain to people sort of where you sit inside Mattel and what your role is.
Sure, I'm happy to. So for close to 30 years, I've been researching kids and parents and leisure time activity. For 20 of those years, I've spent them at Mattel, investigating all sorts of different platforms of play. I've worked on every brand that Mattel has, from Barbie, Hot Wheels, Fisher-Price, American Girl, to many others. Done research on traditional toys, electronics, digital gaming. So had a lot of experience observing changes globally and trends around play. And where I sit now is really as the head of purposeful play and innovation insights at Mattel, so continuing my work around understanding kids, their lifestyles, shifting lifestyles, play patterns, interest in toys, and in particular interest in the evolving landscape of content. So that's what I do, and I'm happy to be here, really privileged to be here, and excited to share some of the things we're learning.
Fantastic. So just to be clear, you sit in your office, and people come and they say to you, Michael, we're thinking of this. How does that, help us understand how that might fit into an emerging context? So in a way, you're the sort of, I hate this phrase, but you're sort of the Imagineer, are you, in terms of people understanding where their strategy might fit into the way kids are evolving?
Absolutely. So voice of the kids, voice of our consumer, helping people understand how play, how behaviors, how child development feeds into the products and the purpose of what we're trying to do with our brands.
And we'll talk a bit about that phrase. Michael and I had a fascinating conversation. Was it just last week? It feels like about a year ago now, but where the phrase purposeful play recurred, and we'll be talking about that later. But I think the sort of, the emerging purpose of play, and anyone here who's got kids has definitely experienced the addictive qualities of digital play, and no doubt have, there's a range of sort of opinions and feelings about that. So we will absolutely be talking about that a bit. I think, first up, and what we're going to be doing is kind of chatting and kind of referring to a rather lovely presentation Michael's brought here called The Future of Play. So I think what would be kind of useful, Michael, would be to sort of help the audience and me understand what is and isn't changing. Because obviously people think everything's changing, and then you go, yeah, but kids are kids, and is this new world really rewiring kids, or is it just the old stuff on the new opportunities? So maybe you could just spend, I don't know, 5 minutes or so helping us understand, what's changing and what's not.
Sure, happy to. I think, one of the fundamentals that we often talk about is that, especially when it comes to play behaviors, the play behaviors tend to stay the same, or there's a lot of consistency that we've observed globally over the years. But what's happening is the platforms that children use for play are really evolving at an incredibly rapid pace. And that's some of the information that I have here that I'll happy to present. I can pull it up on the screen if that makes sense now. So one of the most dramatic trends that we're seeing, and I'm sure any of you who have kids or nieces or nephews observe as well, is this dramatic adoption of new technology platforms, right? So we're seeing the rise in tablets and smartphones in particular. This is among kids ages 3 to 12 years old. So we've been tracking this information for years. Just last year was our latest wave, and we're seeing almost near universal adoption among kids of tablets, nearly 90%. And we've seen this accelerated growth happen over the years. So it's really revolutionary. And we're seeing it not just with not just with 10 and 11-year-olds, but we're seeing this with kids as young as 2. Infants and toddlers who are using these devices. I think this, what this data is telling us is, kids around the age of 2. Nearly 70% have used some kind of tablet or smart device. So this is becoming pervasive technology that is just dramatically changing what kids do in their leisure time. And it's having an impact on perceptions of traditional toy play. So when we talk to kids and we find out, well, when you want to engage in play, we call this our desire continuum. It's the point at which their desire for digital experiences overcomes the desire for more analog, traditional experiences. And we're seeing this in the US, happens at around 6.5 years old. And we've got this data from other countries around the world. I've got some here just from Europe to illustrate. We see a similar interest in digital experiences in the UK, a bit more prolonged in France and in Germany. However, we're seeing this also get much younger in terms of kids' interest in digital experiences. So I think it's a real dramatic trend that's creating a tension among parents, right? Because parents see kids engage in digital platforms. On the one hand, they don't want them to have all this screen time, but on the other hand, they're also seeing how kids use them and that there are many benefits that they can get from the technology. So when we capture parents' attitudes, what we're seeing is still about 9 out of 10 parents really actively encourage more traditional toy play, but the number of parents are rising, especially millennial parents who are encouraging the benefits of these digital platforms.
And obviously, the news is full of sort of, a mixture of kind of scare and thoughtful pieces on, the effect, for example, of social media on tween development, for example, and, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And in your sort of, in your capacity at Mattel, do you see, do you sort of have a feeling about whether or not one is better or not better, or, do you make a value judgment there? Obviously there is a sort of moral responsibility on everyone in this room to make sure that we're providing, healthy experiences for kids. Do you have a feeling that one is better, or is it purely a matter of design?
I really think there are complementary benefits that these different platforms can offer. And, I think in terms of a child's development, it's great to have a balanced introduction because I think with analog play experiences, more traditional toys, there isn't a better platform for a child to express their imagination and start developing those creative skills that we know are really important as they get into their tween teen years, adulthood. But the digital platforms also can offer really incredible content and really engaging interactive experiences. We'll talk a little bit more about coding and STEM technology and how, so there's a lot of benefits that can come from each. Yeah. And, as a company engaged in this world of play, we're trying to provide as many sort of purposeful meaning experiences, leveraging these different technologies as we can. So that's ultimately our goal.
And why do you think, I mean, obviously, toys and imaginative play have been around for, 10,000 years, and digital platforms have been around for 10. Why do you think that digital is so sort of rapacious in its advance in the imaginations and desires of children?
I mean, I think it's the versatility of the platform. Really, it's about, when you get these tablets and smart devices in the hand of a child, it's not just about play. You can interact with games, but they're also platforms for content, and they're they're just multi-purposeful and multifunctional. So I think that's been behind some of the explosive growth, and we even have some information about how that's changed their content behavior, if you want to take a look at it.
Yes, let's do that for sure. I think, would it be fair to say that it's the first time that a platform has also provided platforms, in most people's minds until very recently, were linear content delivery mechanisms. Would it be fair to say that as a toy company, therefore, it's the first time you've discussed a platform as also being, as it were, a venue for play? Or would you have called a board game a platform, for example? I mean, how does that change your view of what a platform is?
With the new technologies, I mean, I think what's changed, and again, I'll go back to it, it's just the multi-functional aspect of it. It's you can use a smart device or a tablet, when we talk about that as the platform. You can use it for learning. You can use it for creative play. You can use it for competitive gaming play. I mean, there are all sorts of play potential with it.
Okay, well, it's almost as if we planned this, isn't it, Michael? So let's just talk about what different kinds of play there are, because we discussed, that you referred to something called the 3 buckets of play, and I think that's something that would be, it's such a useful and graspable concept. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Sure, we can talk about that. And I know before we had just the impact, this was something we were talking about, just the multifunctional aspect of these platforms and understanding what kids are doing with smart devices and tablets. We've done a lot of work really on how it's impacting their content consumption, which I'm sure everybody here is curious about.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of remarkable, the observations we've been making over the years, in that what we're seeing is this is share of time a child spends watching content on a particular platform. So we've just been seeing the share of time they spend watching on TV decline, while we've observed an incredible rise in the other platforms that are out there as sources of content delivery. So because of this, what you're also seeing are different channels of distribution that are emerging, that are delivering content on these new platforms. So of course on TV, you have live TV, which is now oftentimes being streamed onto that platform. And then of course the rise of YouTube and Netflix and other types of channels that are driving content to these new, more mobile technologies. So we're seeing a big impact there, not just on where kids are getting content and when children are watching content, but also the types of content they enjoy watching. So, of course, it has always been, full-length TV episodes, a really common type of content that kids have enjoyed, but we've seen a dramatic rise in short-form content. And with that dramatic rise in short-form content, we're also seeing new genres of content emerge, which is really entertaining and interesting to see what's happening out there in the kids' content space. Of course, there's animation, there's user-generated content. We've seen the rise of unboxing. We've seen tutorials. Is anyone's children out there making slime right now? Anyone?
Probably actually right now.
Yes, okay, we got someone there. Yeah. All right, it's whether it was the rainbow loom a few years ago or slime now, we're seeing the rise of this sort of tutorial content around DIY types of activities. Jump scares have been a popular genre. Esports, watch them play videos. I don't know how many kids you've seen watch somebody playing Minecraft or some other video game, as well as speed stuff. right? Speed drawing, speed gaming, just really watching condensed formats of activities. So all these incredible genres that are emerging, and something that as a both play developer and content creator ourselves, we're also trying to tap into. So what we're trying to do with one of our brands, Barbie, is trying to introduce her in a genuine, authentic way to these new platforms as a vlogger. So then, yes, that's fun.
Yes, totally. Yeah, really fun.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the buckets of play.
Yeah. So sorry, we kind of diverged into the content.
No.
Space,
it's all good. It's all good. We're back in the room. Yeah.
This is the problem when you have a linear slideshow and an interactive
and a three-way. Yes, exactly.
Right? Okay, so the future of play, buckets of play. So how are all these changes in technology really impacting the play landscape and what we're doing and the intersection of content and play as well? What we really see how that emerging, these changes emerging is, one, in this world of what we call tech-amplified play. Also the rise of STEM and robotics as a content area. The endurance and the important endurance of imaginative play and how content can be a catalyst for imaginative play has been very important, as well as a movement around creative play, which is really kind of dramatic with kids, which is kids becoming content creators themselves, a growing trend we're seeing that's really important in the play space. So what are some examples of these? Well, in tech amplified play, this is really about the augmented reality, virtual reality trend. As a play organization, we're tapping into this with a lot of IoT-based toys, and one that'll be coming out this fall is the Barbie hologram. And what's interesting about this, I thought as an example, especially for this audience, is it's truly the integration of content and play.
You didn't really need to ask that question. That was probably the most obvious answer on earth, wasn't it?
It's almost in Southern California.
Yeah, it's sunny again.
Cannes and Los Angeles. But I think, what's really fascinating, again, the intersection of content, right, in a play platform. So really seeing the blend of physical, digital, phygital kind of experiences.
Phygital.
I know, like I had
Okay, everyone write that down. Use it in your next meeting.
All right. So that's one example. I think STEM and robotic play, there are products out there that are really tapping into this content area. What's really interesting, this is just some data from a recent study we've conducted, around kids and coding. I think just in the past year, we're seeing the rise of coding behavior among children. It's gone up from 25, 30, 40%. So then, of course, we're trying to deliver this through our brands and also through our content. Products like AI Hot Wheels, school-based programs like Speedometry, where kids are learning physics with Hot Wheels cars, to the Fisher-Price Codapillar, which teaches basic coding skills. When we get to the bucket of imaginative play, so again, in this digital ephemeral world, imagination and analog play is still really important. From a parent's perspective, it is viewed, toys that really activate a child's imagination is still viewed as one of the most important benefits of play. We continue to try to deliver on that. And I think what's interesting is then the role of content in that. So when we talk about content that drives toy play, what we're really talking about are what are some of those qualities that help drive purposeful, imaginative storytelling among a child, which is what we do a lot of in the Barbie brand. These are some recent campaigns where we've really tried to reinforce the purposeful nature of play.
Because obviously probably most of the people in this room are creating content, therefore that would sort of speak to this bucket of play. And so when a producer comes to Mattel, I mean, obviously, we all know that there, you get the play pattern question. So you say, well, what's the play pattern we're plugging into here? So if the play pattern is imaginative play, if a producer comes to a company like Mattel and says, well, the play pattern is imaginative play, and it's and the way the show's going to provoke that behavior is by having fantastic characters and brilliant storylines. I imagine that's not quite the answer. That's not the full answer, is it? Or is it, do you think, in terms of an imaginative play sort of play?
Yeah, I mean, well, oftentimes we get the question, what is it that there are some kinds of content that are really amazing content, amazing programs, do really well with children, are entertaining to watch, have great messaging, but may not necessarily have an associated massive merchandising program, even though maybe someone has tried. So what we know is, when a child watches content, there's certain kinds of content and there's elements of certain content that really allow that experience to continue through the physical toy world. And not every property can do that. And there are certain qualities that we look for in content that we know can help drive that. Not to give away the secret sauce, but there are some things that just rules of thumb for content that we know can help drive play patterns. And I see everybody's taking a picture of it. So you've got exactly 5 seconds and we're out. Okay. So,
that was the secret sauce.
A little bit, not really.
Just a drop.
No, but just to talk about some of those qualities. I think, you know, it's when you look at content that has action, that has clearly defined characters, that has purposeful characters so you understand their motivations, that has a variety of characters, that has good and evil clearly defined, that has, even if you have bad guys, there's something redeemable about those characters. You're also looking for content that has signature settings and worlds, maybe signature accessories or gear and vehicles. I mean, all these kinds of elements help a child then. They become the tools for imaginative play. One of the elements is humor too. Humor always makes for good content. But when you're asking a child to play based off of your content, because what kids, they don't typically just redo the storyline.
No.
What they like to do is they like to extend the storyline. So they'll create the sequel and the sequel's sequel. But what they need are really good character development to do that, great settings, great accessories, but humor, it's something that's really difficult to play. So we know, like SpongeBob SquarePants, I mean, an amazing piece of content, wonderful, but very based on humor. So for a child to play out scenarios with toys that recreate jokes, it's kind of like tickling yourself. It just doesn't quite work, right? So sometimes that doesn't necessarily drive the toy play. It may drive other great merchandising programs. But those are some of the elements. And again, that's what we're really looking for, because we, again, believe so much in the value of imaginative play. What are those elements of content that can really extend a child's imaginative play experience?
Well, like all these conversations, I could continue having it forever, but time ticks on. So let's talk about this trend that you're seeing, the kid as producer themselves, and then we'll end by just reflecting maybe a little on what the relationship is between a company like Mattel and producers, content producers. So maybe you could tell us what you're seeing here.
Sure. I mean, this is one of the more one of the bigger shift changes we're seeing in the landscape of play, which is child as content creator, child as director, child as producer. It's remarkable what the user-generated content is that's being produced. We did a study recently, and this is among older children, 7 to 10 years old. Nearly half of them are creating content. I mean, the content is a broad range of content. It can be everything from photographs, but it's also home movies, it's stop-motion videos, animated videos. I mean, these are kids who are really engaged in this world, and the way we kind of talk about it is, I mean, in the world of play, you've always had children drawing pictures with crayons or markers and bringing them to their parents, and their parents would proudly display them on the refrigerator. I mean, that's been an enduring sort of way of a child, parent being proud of their accomplishments. So now what we're seeing is the refrigerator.
Maybe a hot tip from a refrigerator manufacturer. They should get on that.
Well, yeah, but the problem is the new refrigerator is your social media account, right? And instead of putting the crayon on the crayon drawing on the refrigerator,
it's on your Facebook
what you're
page.
doing is it's the user-generated content that the child is creating that's going on the social media account, and that's the big change. That's kind of remarkable and cool. And so what's happening is opportunities are for tools that kids can use for that content creation.
And presumably that almost all falls into some form of the bracket of imaginative play in itself, does it not? Yeah. Okay, so just sort of, and we'll try and find time, and Michael will be available after the conversation with Nick and Daniel for Meet the Speaker, so I don't want to spend too much time on questions. So just obviously as a TV in the current in the sort of classical ecosystem currently, as a TV producer, you go to the toy company, you pitch your show, you try and get that deal sewn up as part of your financing, and then you go and produce the show. I've heard anecdotally, for example, that a Netflix deal doesn't quite unlock the same sort of opportunities in the minds of a toy company. I'm not quoting you. I'm quoting sort of general sort of feedback that one's been getting. So what do you think, because it's become so symbiotic for television to work with toy companies like Mattel, and that feels like it's changing because of the difference in the way, for example, people consume VOD projects. Or is that true, or what do you think the sort of future emerging symbiosis will be between many of the... I mean, hands up in this room, who is a content producer for kids? Right, exactly. So, that's a fair proportion of the people here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, so I think what's happening, a couple things that are going on. I mean, one, as a company with brands and franchises that we're trying to keep healthy, keep relevant, we understand that content is an incredible touch point for our consumer, a way for them to engage. So it's important for us to be creating incredible content as well that reinforces the purposefulness of the brands. And we're experiencing firsthand how this changing landscape is affecting reach, right? Is impacting the reach the content can have. So I think there are changes in, it's a fragmented landscape. You just don't get the reach that you used to. So how do you get that distribution for amazing content that people are producing? So one, I think that is something that's changing. Our partners that we've had in the past are still very important partners today. But I do think it's, how do you explore more of these avenues for distribution?
So presumably what you're now seeing is, just to this point about fragmentation and reach, is that the smart producers are coming to you with wider plans for how that reach and impact will be achieved despite fragmentation? Or is that part of Mattel's role now? Or how does that...
it can be a little bit of both, but I think that is when we're partnering with content producers. I think is the content going to drive play experiences is something that we're always very interested in. And then, yes, if there is a way, if somebody's coming to us with an avenue for that distribution, that makes it all the more attractive, for sure.
And it's very difficult, I know, because, the world changes and one model feels like it's dropping away slightly, but just before the new model's really established itself. But do you still... television has been obviously a very, very powerful part of the toy company's armory in terms of stimulating play, getting kids to engage with stories and characters and indeed objects themselves. Do you still see TV as having that power, or do you now... what's the future that you're preparing for, insofar as you can talk about that on this stage today?
The future, look, TV is still an incredibly powerful... TV, again, it's always tricky. Is it TV that
is it the device
or
the
object? Yes,
exactly,
a big screen is something that will always be important, because that big screen in a playroom, in a family room, that's where you get the social... these devices are very solitary. So the big screen's very important. And how that content gets distributed through the big networks, they still have a lot of reach. They're very important. That will continue to exist, but I do believe that, yes, the channels will continue to fragment.
But presumably, someone referred to the way content is consumed on kids' content on Netflix as churn and burn, i.e., people burn through the kids' bit. Certainly my kids watch Lemony Snicket in about as much time as it took to watch it back to back, and then it was sort of on to the next thing. Whereas I guess in, you know, as it were, in the old days, there would have been 52 episodes of Lemony Snicket on continuous rotation for 3 years, and that would have provided a very different level of sort of messaging and consistency. Right. Does that have a big effect on your business?
Well, yeah, I think one, that's the power of those platforms right now, where you've got scheduled content, just sustaining a child's engagement and interest. But I think that is an area right now that we are actively studying, which is, what is the effect of binge watching? What is the effect of concentrated exposure to multiple episodes in a short period of time? How often are children going back to those episodes? Because we do know that kids like repeat viewing. But how are those dynamics changing? Something we are studying, and maybe I'll be back here again to talk about those findings.
Yes, and we'd like to have you back to talk about that when you figured it out, please. Thank you. All right, terribly, it's time, Michael. I'm sorry to say. Thank you so much for joining us today, and perhaps you could join me in thanking Michael. Thank you. This is Nick Walters from Hopster. He's the CEO and co-founder there. And on the end is Daniel Hewitt, who's the VP of Nonlinear Programming at the Walt Disney Company UK. Is that right, Daniel? Yeah.
Is this on? Hi.
Yeah, it's right.
Hey,
yeah, it's on.
Morning. Yeah.
Great. Good. So we're going to be, you know, I think after the break, we're going to be talking to 3 people from companies who represent, I think, what would have been called sort of MCNs, or, you know, content networks. I think it's fair to say that both, you know, Daniel and Nick, you know, Nick maybe slightly more from a platform perspective, Daniel slightly more, I think, from a production perspective, are busy, you know, thinking about, you know, how do you make content, how do you gear a platform, how do you optimize what you're doing, either from a content or from a platform perspective, or both, you know, for the changing habits of children, for the changing consumption habits of children. Clearly, YouTube is a massive, massive, massive growth area on kids is a massive area on growth YouTube at the moment. You know, possibly, you know, described to me last week as the big opportunity on YouTube. So I think what we'll talk about now for the next half hour is from the perspective of a platform, and from the perspective of someone very, very, very involved, deeply involved in both talent and format and content from these emerging spaces. So maybe we could just start, for those who don't know Nick, just maybe you could just explain a little bit about what Hopster is and the journey so far.
Sure. So we're a video and learning platform for preschool kids. So we're purely focused on 2 to 6. We started life, I'd say, being largely video driven. So we started life as a fairly conventional kind of SVOD service for kids. But we always had a very clear mission, which is we wanted to be very focused on learning. So today, when we talk about the platform, what we say is we help kids learn through the stories they love. And we do that with a single app. You can get us on iPhone, you can get us on your tablet, get us on connected TV. Significant chunk of what we do is still video. Some of that's, you know, TV shows you'd see up on a linear TV channel. We have Teletubbies, In the Night Garden, Thomas, Bob. But also we do a lot of short form, a lot of learning focused kind of mobile originated content. We're a big gaming platform as well. We have an in-house game studio, so about a third of the time spent on Hopster is spent playing games. Music's very big for us, and we also just launched books in the UK in partnership with HarperCollins. So really what we're building is this kind of hub for playful learning content that helps kids learn through the stories they love.
And that's still a subscription service, so that's something that parents are paying for monthly or yearly?
Yeah, we're a straight subscription service, $3.99 a month in the UK.
And you're available in the UK, obviously, and everywhere else, or what's your reach?
Increasingly most of the world. We're in about 100 countries right now. So #1 grossing app for kids in the UK. Australia, New Zealand, significant for us. Top 10 grossing app for kids in France. We launched in the US in August last year. Our Apple TV app is now top 10 grossing app for kids in the US as
Fantastic.
well. So we make progress.
Very good. Thank you. Well, we'll be talking about how you've done that a bit more. Daniel, maybe you could share where you're at in Maker and what's happening.
You talk Maker. So I spun out of Maker Studios into Disney, part of a small but well-armed team of people with a pretty clear focus for Disney on a global basis, and that's to help grow audience and revenue opportunities in this idea of ridiculously titled non-linear space. So original content, not necessarily designed for linear output.
And this is quite a new sort of, as my repeated references to Maker as opposed to Disney testify, this is a reasonably recent sort of reframing, isn't it? So could you help people understand sort of what the journey from Maker to today has been, and maybe just a little bit about why, because obviously everyone knows about the Disney acquisition of Maker, and that, you know, that was very, very big and is significant news for us all. But obviously this is quite a strategic shift for you guys, isn't it? Could you just explain what that shift is and sort of what you think the intention behind it has
Yes, I mean,
been?
Disney's already doing an incredible job in terms of leveraging their existing IP, formats and brands, and propagating them in an incredibly successful way across all of the social platforms as they stand today. And it does a brilliant job in terms of sustaining and building fandom and interest and intrigue and loyalty around those brands. Alongside that, though, Disney's very acutely aware that there are incredibly large audiences that aren't connecting to those brands and that they don't reach. And so what we're doing is we're working with either new channels, new creators, working with a lot of the maker talent, connecting to new content creators on those platforms, on those spaces, as well as producers, traditional producers of content, and trying to evolve and create new creative expressions that talk to this audience through original programming.
And Maker was traditionally, came from the multi-channel network space. There were many, many hundreds of channels under the Maker label, weren't there?
Thousands
upon thousands of channels. And I remember watching those old Maker adverts before we really understood what Maker was. And it was like this extraordinary kind of explosion of creativity. And now it feels that you guys are, as it were, moving towards a more focused activity, or focusing more on the talent and the channels that look like they might cross over into premium. Is that right? Is it about bridging AdVOD to SVOD and the casual to the premium? Is that part of the thinking there, do you think?
Well, I think it's about the best possible storytelling. So there's an approach to a craft, and that takes a lot of time and development, and so that's one differentiator in our space versus working in partnership with content creators who are uploading 3 videos a day of the Let's Plays that we saw, which is phenomenal and has huge audience traction. But how can we work with that individual in a slightly different way, perhaps, and create something that has perhaps a slightly deeper emotional engagement with that core audience?
And I guess, therefore, the ability to become a brand and generate all the subsidiary sort of activities that Disney is so fantastic at leveraging. Yeah. Okay, great. So let's just talk a little bit about the audience that we're going for. So obviously, in the kids' TV world, as we all know, there's 0 to 6, 6 to 11. You then subdivide, 0 to 3, 3 to 6, and so on and so on. Endlessly, we all know this stuff backwards. Obviously, in digital, those two audiences are very, very different in terms of how you reach them. So, Nick, you focus on preschool, purely on preschool. So let's just talk a little bit about user acquisition and what you think, what's easy. And Daniel, you're a bit focused, a little older, aren't you? So, so I think I'll just talk to Nick now about this audience, and if it's okay, I'll come to you and talk about the older audience. So let's just talk about something, what makes your life easy and what makes your life hard in terms of user acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting in that, for a lot of people, maybe sat in the audience, who are content creators, who hear a lot, oh, you should be digital, you should be digital, you should be digital, you should create something for digital. I think where often the breakdown has been is you think, okay, well, we're a content creator, we're going to be digital, so we'll make an app, or we'll make a video for YouTube, we'll make a series of videos for YouTube. Those are typically where you start. And often what happens is you make an app, and you put it in the App Store, and it gets 200 downloads, and 2,000 downloads maybe, and okay, that was £5,000, and okay, well, that didn't sound that exciting. Or maybe your YouTube video gets, a few 100,000 views, and that sounds really exciting, but then you look at the revenue, and you're like, okay, that's not that exciting.
Bit less exciting.
Bit less exciting. And then you're like, okay, well, that was my digital strategy. Back to TV. Off to MIPTV. So I think this whole problem of how do you find an audience, how do you build an audience, how do you monetize an audience has been a real problem in digital, and I think it's really held back the growth of quality content in digital, because you've been in this place where you're trying to build distribution platforms and monetization platforms that can bring great new stuff to digital in a way that makes sense for audiences and makes sense for content creators. So when I think about platforms like us, we're a subscription platform. It's hard work, but we have built a viable, meaningful, and growing digital subscription base. What that enables us to do is go out and be a path to market for other content creators to help make sure that people get properly paid and that they find an audience. It is not easy for us to do that. We make significant investments in user acquisition marketing. We have a bunch of distribution deals with people like Vodafone, people like EE, people like Samsung Kids in the US. And I think you need players of a certain scale who can do that. But I think if that's kind of part of how we see our role in the market.
And presumably your focus on play and learning through play is part of the strategy that you have for persuading parents that this is something that they should be parting with their monthly subscription for, and the people that you target. I mean, to what extent are you targeting 0 to 6 and hoping to sort of provoke pester power, or are you targeting parents only with a sort of more wholesome message, or who are you trying to provoke to make the purchase decision?
So I think there's a couple of things there. I think first of all, yes, you're absolutely right. What we do at Hopster is we help kids learn through the stories they love. We have a very specific focus around what we do around learning and what we do around education. We're not trying to be Netflix. Netflix are great at being Netflix. We're not trying to be YouTube Kids. YouTube Kids are great at being YouTube Kids. We have a very specific positioning around what we do. And that conversation initially is with the parent. We often get asked this question about who's your customer, and the answer is it's both. I mean, parents make the decision to get Hopster, parents pay. If their child's not using it, if their child doesn't like it, they will stop paying pretty quickly. Yeah. This idea that you can convince a parent once and then have them continue to pay independent of the fact their kid hates it.
It's not the same as guilt gym membership.
No, sadly not. Sadly not. So no, that conversation is with the parent. And I think, but then when I think about what enables us to have that conversation, what gives us permission to have that conversation, we make real investments in learning. We have a head of learning on board, former teacher and educational advisor. We have a published curriculum. We will send you an email every month. We will tell you what your child's learned and what they've discovered. We have, genuinely, we do nearly as many gameplays now every month as we do video streams. So, all of those things go into that story and that credibility with parents.
Got you, thank you. So, Daniel, you target not very different, but the next, as it were, the next phase of life, and maybe even the phase after that, don't you? So, yeah. What are some of sort of the, what makes that easier for you than what Nick's trying to do, and what makes it harder, do you think?
I think the challenge is that we're definitely operating at the older end of the kids spectrum, so really 10 and plus. And we bring up, we know that the program that we've produced to date and the talent that we work with capture a much younger audience as well, for sure. And we know that because we've done a huge amount of insight and data and research. We did a big partnership in the UK with NetMums, and we surveyed 2,000 parents to get really clear digital viewing habits of their children, the types of talent that they were connecting to, the regularity, the amount of time. And so that gave us and we coupled that with some great insight that Disney publishes fairly regularly. And so when we combine that view, we can see that actually they're very narrow demographics, age groups around certain talent. And so that's really interesting because it means that they're migrating a lot quicker than perhaps certainly a lot of channel commissioners had previously thought. So it gives us a really good opportunity to...
migrating, as it were, okay, I'm 12 now. I don't watch
Yeah.
what I watched when I was 11 and a half.
Absolutely, yeah.
gotcha.
And literally it's within weeks,
Yeah.
you know, the tastes, the trends shift very, very quickly. So
But-
you need to be...
But it's true to say that your marketing, your user acquisition is targeted at the kids themselves, right? You're not trying to persuade parents that what
No,
you're
very
doing is
much,
a good
yeah.
idea. You are fighting for kids' attention and trying to get them to make the choice, which is obviously very different from what Nick's doing.
And choice is an interesting, choice word, because what we're doing is for that demographic, we're collaborating and partnering with that talent who we've identified connect to that target demographic. Yeah. And in that instance, we'll work with third-party production companies and with the talent themselves to really understand you know, what are their aspirations, where creatively, if they had a bit more time and some additional resources and funding, what else could they produce?
I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, in the next session, we're going to talk a little bit about the way the idea of channels are changing, because obviously the channel used to be, you know, the media brand itself, and now certainly in a YouTube context, the channel is often a sort of unitary brand. And
yeah, I'm channel agnostic in that regard, so
right.
I don't have the burden, the commitment to run a channel.
But you work with a talent that already has traction with the audience, so the influencer. Would you only ever work on a piece of IP? Would all your developments typically be built around a piece of talent with social influence, or would you come straight out of the gate with here's a completely new IP that no one's ever heard of, and it's not got anyone that you've heard of in either, and we have sufficient influence to drive the audience to it? Or is that something that's coming, or what?
Yeah, so it depends on what the distribution channel would look like in terms of where the audience are. To date, it's very much been much more collaborative with those talent, and they might be supporting some new IP or a new show that we've developed, and we're piloting episodes or distributing episodes across multiple talents channels simultaneously, and then stitching them together as a playlist on those talents channels. So it's a new way of thinking about syndicating, distributing, and building brand franchises in partnership with the talent.
And I'm sort of, it's hard to stay on topic because every time you go, it's a bit like sort of being on Amazon, you find yourself down a rabbit hole. But that in that context where, you know, you are paying to produce content that sits on a piece of talent's channel, that is presumably about brand building prior to sort of some kind of export to a more proprietary environment, is it? Often,
yeah, and well, I think it'll come on to, you know, how we develop formats for global distribution and reproduction, because a lot of it's around piloting, a lot of it's around building partnerships with new creative talent, new production companies. It's a really efficient way to get really rich audience insight and data back, pretty cost effectively as well.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously built our entire company around piloting, so you'll get no argument from me there. Okay, so let's just again, it's just horrible. There's got this red clock ticking away. So let's just talk about new brands versus, obviously you work, Nick, with a lot of existing brands, but also I think are, you know, interested and pursuing various original IPs. I know, you know, Daniel, part of your work is, you know, working with existing Disney brands, but also, as you've just said, launching new brands. So if to someone sitting out there in the audience thinking, okay, this is it, this is the market where I'm going to fully engage or become a digital company or launch my own platform, can we just talk a little bit about the relationship between working with established brands and new brands, and how do you see that, Nick? Because obviously, in some ways, the real juice, if you owned Peppa Pig, that would be a good thing.
That would be a good thing.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing. That would not. We could live with
that.
No,
exactly.
We could make time for it.
So let's just
in our busy schedules, we could make time for it. No, I think there's a couple of things. I think, yes, you're absolutely right. We have some fantastic relationships with people like DreamWorks Animation, people like Entertainment One. We carry Peppa, we carry Ben Holly, we carry Thompson Tank Engine. Fantastic shows, fit our brand. Genuinely, I think, have learning value for kids. They're awesome, and we love them. What we have absolutely found is that we also take a bunch of material which might not find a home on a linear TV, and not only is it great for our positioning, not only is it great for our mission, it really finds an audience. We have a show called Punky. It's an Irish show, features relatively short show. The protagonist is a kid with Down syndrome, and we launched that a while back. It also is part of our celebrating diversity theme at the moment that we're running. That's not a show that got some pick up on terrestrial, but it's not been widely distributed. It's doing huge numbers for it. I mean, it's massively, massively competitive. Regularly for us, in our top 10 most viewed content, you'll see 3, 4, 5 different music titles. Not at all uncommon for half of our most popular content to be music and song based. Some of that's from well-known creators. Some of that's from people who we have helped find an audience. And again, I think that it's about, if you find great content that's right for the audience that you're targeting, we can absolutely build. I think we have a pretty good track record on building an audience for it. And yes, we have begun to do more around creating some of our own titles as well. We have our first like Hopster music launched earlier, a couple of months ago. That's been doing super well. And I think where we look around our curriculum, where we find areas in our curriculum where there's not great stuff being made, there's no reason, if we can get the price right, that we shouldn't just make it ourselves.
And presumably as your reach and your influence grows, I mean, it goes back to the conversation we were having with Michael about, the power of a platform to unlock all the things that follow or become part of a hit for kids. Presumably, there is a future where Hopster has the reach globally to be unlocking those secondary activities, those toy deals, that's on the roadmap, is it, for you guys, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, toys is a special case, right? I mean, if you're running Mattel, you need a lot of eyeballs. And, if Netflix isn't enough eyeballs on a regular enough basis, then, I'm not sure if, the thematic players like us are ever going to... I don't think you're ever going to build a massive retail campaign off Hopster. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think it's unlikely. But I think there are a couple of interesting things. I think, one, what we can do is we touch or offer our users lots and lots of different types of content all in one place. So this idea that you make a video, and then if it did well, maybe you make a game, and if the game does well, maybe you make a book. Well, we can do a video game and a book all at the same time, relatively inexpensively, on the same platform, and that's kind of cool. That lets us do some interesting things. And secondly, and I think this is an underappreciated fact about SVOD, we can talk directly to our audiences. And you can't do that if you're on a channel. You can't even do that on YouTube, really. We run a private social network for parents on Hopster. We have everyone's email address. We invite people to join if they want. We launch a new show. We're like, hey, did you like that show? Hey, we noticed your kid watched that show. What did you think of it? You didn't like that show. Why didn't you like it? That back and forth, that conversation, that's a really interesting place that you can go. There's a lot you can do with that. And I think as we scale up, as we get more sophisticated around our data, as I think about how we help content owners to develop what they're doing, I think that's a really interesting place for platforms like ours to be.
Because of the data and the insight that your platform automatically generates about.
Yeah, I mean,
and not so automatically.
Data, insight, but also part of that conversation. I mean, like a very basic thing. We have sometimes we work with that started life as books. Yeah. We've just announced a partnership with HarperCollins where we're licensing some of their titles. If you've just watched the video on Hopster, if you've just read the ebook, we would absolutely encourage you to go and buy the physical book, because we think physical books are cool, and we'd like to encourage kids to take a physical book to bed with them.
So the power to engage, to embed the point of consumption to the point of maximum engagement is huge, isn't it? I mean, and only growing.
Yeah, and I think there's a point of maximum engagement. There's also, again, we have a specific mission. We help kids learn through the stories they love. If you're going to do, if you've really enjoyed the video over breakfast, we would probably prefer you to go and get a physical book and take that to bed than take a screen to bed, because we think books are nice. Yeah. And if we can then make that easy for you, and make that easy for a parent, make that easy in a way that works for a content owner, that's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And Daniel, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the way you guys deploy talent in the creation of new brands. Yeah. Let's just talk about, again, because I'm sure that there are lots and lots of people in this room who would love to kind of come and have a conversation with you guys and go, we've got this, and they will mostly be new brands because that's what a production company is in the business of creating. Yeah. So when you're assessing an idea, a new idea from somebody, what do you think? Because as we know, as Nick alluded to, you make a video, you put it on YouTube, no one watches, you go, oh, okay, that didn't work, back to telly. What is it that tips the scale for you when someone comes to you with a new idea or a piece of talent walks through the door?
So from a digital exploitation perspective, it's really looking at something that we can reformat in other markets, again, cost effectively, because one of the huge points around consumption of content, digital content internationally, is that the majority of it, specifically on YouTube, is locally produced content. It's in native language, it's culturally much more relevant and relatable.
And what's that statistic you had? A brilliant statistic.
Yeah, so in terms of digital content consumption, less than 10% is international content. More than 90% in most markets is locally produced content, whether that's local influencers, local YouTubers. So we're a huge, big global digital talent.
And in traditional telly, what's the proportion of US content?
I mean, it's
the converse stat is.
It's not quite converse, but it's a lot more internationally distributed content.
Yeah. It's like 60. It's like 60. Something around 60%, right? So on traditional TV platforms or linear broadcast platforms, 60% of the content will be international content, by which we largely mean North American content, I guess. But on a digital platform, 90% of the consumption will be local.
Correct,
That's really significant.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So trying to think. So that's to answer the question. Looking for really clever, smart, fun, creative opportunities that and even reversioning in English-speaking territories, but with an Australian accent or a New Zealand accent, or that's an area of real interest for us.
Yeah, got you. And does that bear out your experience, Nick? Or is it less pronounced in a preschool context because the kids' radar is?
I think there is a bit of that. I think a lot of preschool content is not quite as inherently of any one market. I think what's been interesting for us is the ability of some quote-unquote local content, some stuff from outside the UK or the US, to not only work in its home market, but also to, when we pick it up and bring it back to the UK, to find an audience there as well. We have a great Korean show called Glbl. It's all about creativity that we picked up for Southeast Asia. Been very good for us in the UK as well. So I think there is a bit. I think you see. Especially as you move into short form, I think you do see the world getting a bit more global. I think that's interesting.
And I guess this is, by the time we get into some of the older demos, we're talking very much about kids who are starting to go, okay, what's my place in my culture? What's my tribe? So it becomes much more culturally specific, doesn't it, in terms of the cues that they're looking for?
I think that's the really interesting trend, and I know you talk about this as well, is that the demographic piece is really, really important, but the interest piece, when this new generation effectively has unlimited choice at any given time, they're gonna choose the thing that's most interesting to them at that particular moment, and so that's a really challenging thing for.
Well, yes. I mean, in the next one, we're going to talk a bit about our attitudes replacing demographics as the sort of key indicator of sort of targeting indicators. So I think it is. I think we're only just beginning to understand what the sort of seismic kind of effect of digital is going to be on how we conceive and target.
When Michael showed his secret sauce slide,
he did. I know it was all too brief, but so email anyone who took a photo. Email it. So. Let's just, again, this awful clock ticking inexorably down towards zero. Let's just talk about, you're a premium subscription service, Nick. Maker back in the day was obviously very much an AVOD, YouTube-based play. You are now focusing more around premium. What do we think? People in this room are probably largely concerned with what they would think of as the production of premium content. Can we just spend sort of a couple of minutes now just thinking about, are we heading away from a sort of because I think everyone thought, AVOD will just replace TV and the advertising dollars from AVOD will just paste across the advertising dollars that we used to get from TV, and that's just not what's currently happening in VOD, is it?
Well, I think we have a really robust AVOD business, but we continue to have huge success in distribution, and packaging collections and box sets of, again, really targeted thematic content around really tight demographics, and giving that to MVPDs and other platforms around the world, because they understand and know that they need to have that content, because those audiences are watching individual pieces of content again and again and again. It's better to have that content as part of your content ecosystem as a platform or provider than not. So I mean, we're working really closely in collaboration and partnership with lots of big traditional MVPDs and commissions of content to aggregate a lot of this content and make it available.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think on the great sort of AVOD versus everything else debate, AVOD right now is YouTube. YouTube as a fantastic platform. It's great for discovery. There's lots of stuff going on. You know, YouTube's greatest admirers, I think, would agree it's not the place to go make a whole bunch of money unless you're doing it at absolutely massive scale, as Maker was. And you know, I think that there should be more to life than unboxing videos. And if you're going to invest in quality, you need a better platform.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting though is, and we could spend another hour talking about this, is I used to think actually there was a real tension between AVOD and SVOD. I used to think kind of like one wins or the other does.
Yeah.
I think the more we think about it, the more we spend time on it, it's not really true. I think like there's a real, you know, the guilty secret of AVOD is monetization. The guilty secret of SVOD is user acquisition and building an audience and getting people to find it in the first place is hard.
Right.
Like, if you figure out interesting ways to put those two things together over time.
Well, I mean, I guess in TV we've always understood the notion of windowing, but what's interesting is that AVOD, because it's such a great place to pilot, there's a sort of confusion there, isn't it? Because often your pilot goes on AVOD first window, you know, then you go, okay, this is great, let's take it, you know. So what is our first, and then first window becomes Amazon, you know, and then AVOD becomes, you know, so there's a whole sort of emerging notion, isn't there, I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think Disney again, in the years of being really bold in approach and collapsing windows in certain shows, in certain formats where, you know, using freeform to run a series in a linear format, but as soon as episode 1 goes up, you can access and binge watch the entire season on Hulu and freeform app immediately.
Yeah. I think windowing gets smarter. I think like the tools that you have to bring people from AVOD to other environments get smarter. To kind of move audiences between the two get smarter. I think we get smarter about like. I think you see more brands starting to have presence across both. I think that's. I'd expect to see a bunch more of that over the next 2-3 years. And I think actually the partnership, if you like, between AVOD and SVOD becomes they become two complementary sides of the how you make digital work coin.
Yes. Well, that's great because we're going to call it a day there, I'm afraid. I feel terrible. I honestly feel like we've just literally touched the tiniest fraction of what we could be talking about. But I hope it's been interesting and useful for you guys. These guys are going to be available now for 15 minutes to meet any of you outside the room if you want to have a chat. And then in 15 minutes, we're going to be back in here and talking to people who are working in the MCN and the AVOD space and again, crossing into premium. So all that it remains for me to do is to thank you both extremely, very much. Thank you for joining us on stage. I hope you'll agree.